ในน้ำมันไม่มีอากาศอยู่แล้วตัดทิ้งไปเลย
Unit 5, Lessons 5 and 6. Galileo and his telescope.
Galileo was an Italian astronomer who lived a long time ago. He was one of the smartest astronomers in history. He was the very first astronomer to learn about the solar system with a telescope. One of the first things he looked at was the moon. He saw the deepest craters and the highest mountains on the moon with his telescope. Then Galileo studied the planets. He looked at Mercury, the smallest planet, and Jupiter, the biggest planet. He discovered that the planets don't circle the Earth. They circle the sun. Galileo was the first person to see Jupiter's moons. There are 64 moons, but he didn't see all of them. He only saw 4 moons with his telescope. Then he saw something that looked like ears on the planet Saturn. He didn't know he saw the famous rings of Saturn. Some people think Galileo is the father of modern astronomy. In 1989, a spaceship started a trip to study Jupiter and its moons. The name of this spaceship was Galileo.
Awesome. I'm going to go through it again and I'm going to read it much slower. Okay. And then I'm going to have some friends volunteer to read it as well. I didn't highlight this vocabulary word. Telescope. Galileo is the name of the Italian astronomer. Galileo. See right here. That's his name. Galileo was an Italian astronomer who lived a long time ago. He was one of the smartest astronomers in history. He was the very first astronomer to learn about the solar system with a telescope. Wow. Galileo was an Italian Someone say it. Galileo was an Italian.
นักเรียนลองตอบซิกาลิเลโอเขาทำไมคะเป็นอะไรคะ It's
There
an
we go.
astronomer.
Astronomer. Astronomer. Galileo was an Italian astronomer. Wow. Okay, let's keep going. One of the first things he looked at was the moon. He saw the deepest craters and the highest mountains on the moon with his telescope. One of the first things he looked at was the
moon.
What's the moon? Good. And what did he see on the moon? He saw the deepest craters. He saw the deepest, great job, craters, and the highest mountains on the moon with his
telescope.
Very good. Telescope. Telescope. Awesome. Let's keep going. Then Galileo studied the planets. He looked at Mercury, the smallest planet, and Jupiter, the biggest planet. He discovered that the planets don't circle the Earth. They circle the sun. Galileo was the first person to see Jupiter's moons. There are 64 moons, but he didn't see all of them. He only saw 4 moons with his telescope. Then he saw something that looked like ears on the planet Saturn. He didn't know he saw the famous rings of Saturn. Let's see. Then Galileo studied the
Planet.
planets. He looked at
Mercury.
Mercury, the smallest planet, and
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
the biggest planet. Great job, guys. Wow. He discovered that the planets don't circle the
Earth.
They circle the
Sun.
Galileo was the first person to see Jupiter's moons. There are 64 moons, but he didn't see them all. He only saw 4. That's how we write the number 4 moons with his telescope. Then he saw something that looked like the ears on planet
Saturn.
Perfect, Saturn. He didn't know he saw the famous rings of Saturn. Wow. All right, this last part says, some people think Galileo is the father of modern astronomy. In 1989, a spaceship started a trip to study Jupiter and its moons. The name of the spaceship was Galileo. Wow. So look at this word right here, astronomy. Astronomy, very similar to the word astronomer. Astronomer. An astronomer is somebody that studies space, and astronomy is the subject of space. We could say that astronomers study astronomy. That's a fun tongue twister. Astronomers study astronomy. Astronomers study astronomy. Say it with me. Astronomers study astronomy. It's a tongue twister. It means that it's hard to say. Astronomers study astronomy. And astronomy is the study of space. Space or the solar system, right? So astronomers study space. There you go. All right, let's read through it again, and I want you guys to read it, okay? So let me see this first paragraph. Who feels brave today? Who feels brave today? Maybe Ploy? Do you want to give it a shot? I'm right here. I'm going to help you, okay? His name is Galileo. You want to try, Ploy?
Yes, sure.
Okay, let's go.
Galileo.
Yep, Galileo was
Galileo was an
Italian astronomer.
Astronomer.
Very good. Who lived a long time ago.
He lived a long
a
time
ago.
ago. You're doing so good. Let's keep going. He was one of
He was one of
the smartest astronomers.
astronomers at Zero.
In history.
And its
History.
history.
Very good. One more sentence.
He was the very year
Very first astronomer.
very for Zero.
To learn about
To learn about
the solar system
as the solar system
with a telescope.
with a telescope.
Woo! Very good job, Ploy. That was awesome. I'm so proud of you. Way to go. Okay. What about this blue paragraph? Who's feeling brave? How about option? Otto gives me a thumbs up. Otto, do you want to do it? Do you want to read the blue?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
One of the first things he looked at was the moon. He saw the deepest crater and the high mountain on the moon with his telescope.
Very good job, Otto. Yeah, I'm so proud of you guys. Very good. Let's go down here. Oh, someone wrote in the chat. Let me see. 555. I know 5 is ha, right? So you're laughing, right? It's okay. You did a great job. Good job. Ern, you want to do it? It's a big one, Ern. You can do it. You can also split it in half if it's a lot. We can do 2. You can go to moons and then someone else can take over, okay? Go for it, Ern.
Teacher แตงกวาคะTeacher แตงกวาคะ
ค่ะน้องเอิญ
หนูขออ่านพร้อมกับ Teacher ได้ไหมคะ
อ่านกับทีเชอร์เอมิลี่ได้เลยค่ะลูกฝึกอ่านกับทีเชอร์เอมิลี่นะคะบอกทีเชอร์เลยค่ะว่า I need help
I did help Teacher.
Okay, let's do it together. Says, then Galileo studied the planets.
Yes, Galileo
Studied.
study the planet. He looked at Mercury. He looked at Mercury,
The smallest planet.
smallest planet,
And Jupiter.
the biggest planet.
He discovered that the planets don't circle the Earth.
Don't circle the Earth.
They circle the sun.
of the sun.
Galileo was the first person
Was the first Hercules
to see Jupiter's moon.
see Jupiter moon.
Very good job, Ern. Do you want to continue or do you want to pass it on to somebody else?
หนูจะอ่านต่อหรือว่าจะส่งให้เพื่อน
ส่งให้เพื่อนค่ะ
ส่งให้เพื่อน Okay, continue to another.
Okay, perfect. How about cake? Cake, you want to give it a shot? Starting right here, there are 64 moons. Maybe. Let me see if anyone has. How about Miko? Miko, you want to give it a shot?
มิโกะ
ค่ะ
มิโกะเดี๋ยวอ่านกับทีเชอร์นะคะ
ค่ะ
Okay, Miko, let's do it. There
อ่าน
are
มิโกะดูลูกตรงสอนชี้
There are
64
64 moons, but he did not see all for them.
Mm-hmm.
He noisy.
He only saw 4.
He only saw 4
Good
moons.
job. With his telescope.
With his telescope. He saw something that looked like
Ears.
here on the planet Saturn. He did not. Now he saw the
Famous.
famous string for Saturn.
Woo! Very good job, Nico. Oh my gosh, you and Ern did a great job reading this paragraph together. I'm so proud of you guys. Okay, one more. Let's see. Who can read the yellow paragraph? How about on?
อ้นครับ
ครับ
อ้นอ่านลูก
อ่านกับทีเชอร์ได้ปะครับ
ได้ครับ อ่านกับทีเชอร์เอมิลี่ได้เลย อ้นบอกทีเชอร์เลย I need help
I read tell teacher.
Okay, let's do it together. Some people think
Some people think
Galileo
Galileo
is the father
is the father
of modern astronomy.
of modern astronomy.
Yeah, very good. In 1989,
In 1989,
a spaceship
a spaceship
started a trip
started a trip
to study Jupiter
to study Jupiter
and its moons.
and its moon.
The name of this spaceship was Galileo.
The name of this
Spaceship?
spaceship was Galileo.
Yes, very good. Very good on. Wow, you guys are so amazing. You did it. You guys read it. I'm so proud. All right, let's go through it again. and I want you to try to read with me, okay? Galileo and his telescope. Galileo was an Italian astronomer who lived a long time ago. He was one of the smartest astronomers in history. He was the very first astronomer to learn about the solar system with a telescope. One of the first things he looked at was the moon. He saw the deepest craters and the highest mountains on the moon with his telescope. Then Galileo studied the planets. He looked at Mercury, the smallest planet, and Jupiter, the biggest planet. He discovered that the planets don't circle the Earth, they circle the sun. Galileo was the first person to see Jupiter's moons. There are 64 moons, but he didn't see all of them. He only saw 4 moons with his telescope. Oops. Then he saw something that looked like ears on the planet Saturn. He didn't know he saw the famous rings of Saturn. Some people think Galileo is the father of modern astronomy. In 1989, a spaceship started a trip to study Jupiter and its moons. The name of this spaceship was Galileo. Very cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to watch a little video about Galileo. That's probably too long. Okay, this one's good. Okay. I had a couple different ones picked out, and I think with our time left, we can do this one.
My job.
I don't like the ads. Okay, let me share my screen. You guys did a great job reading. I know it was tricky. Now we get to watch a little video.
About Galileo Galilei. You may have heard of him. He was a scientist and inventor, and he lived about 500 years ago. Galileo is famous, you could even say infamous, for one of his big ideas in particular, an idea that got him into big trouble. Galileo liked to build gadgets to help him to experiment and to answer scientific questions. He built compasses, thermometers, a pendulum, and a telescope. How did he come up with the telescope? The story goes that 2 children were rather bored and they were messing about in a shop that made glasses. They discovered that if they held 2 lenses in a line and looked through them, they could see a wind vane that was on top of a church steeple far away, and it looked as though it was right outside their window. When Galileo heard about this, he was very excited. He began to experiment with lenses, and he discovered that when he pointed his gadget with lenses towards the stars at night, he could see the moon and the planets in great detail. Galileo saw things through his telescope that no one else had seen. He was the first person to see the planets looking as though they're up close, and he could see some stars that no one had seen before. Galileo saw patterns of light and shadows on the moon's surface. He worked out that the moon was rough and uneven. He even had a guess at how high some of the moon's mountains might be. Galileo also discovered 4 large moons orbiting Jupiter, and they're now named Galilean moons in his honor. Then, Galileo made his most controversial announcement. He said he was sure, based on his observations, that the sun was not moving around the Earth. Instead, the Earth was orbiting the sun. Galileo wasn't the first astronomer to say that the Earth moves around the sun, but he explained it so clearly that lots of people took notice. 500 years ago, this was very, very big news. In those days, without today's technology, it made sense to everyone to assume that everything goes around the Earth. I'm sure right now you don't feel as though you're standing on a planet that's spinning on its axis while moving through space at several thousand kilometers an hour, but we know we are. What's more, there were even texts in the Bible that seem to say that the Earth is standing still. That's definitely not what Galileo was saying. So how did other people react when Galileo said loudly and clearly that the Earth and not the sun is in motion? The church found this very difficult. For one thing, Galileo's work was impressive, but his version didn't totally fit with what people could observe. Secondly, if Galileo was right, that would mean a really big rethink about how to make sense of what the Bible said about the Earth. This wasn't a completely impossible situation. Many Bible experts have been saying for some time that not everything in the Bible has to be understood literally. Many phrases in the Bible only really make sense if they're understood as metaphors or figures of speech. Even so, the church felt that such a big change shouldn't be rushed. They told Galileo he could talk about his ideas as a theory that seemed to fit with some of the observations, but he mustn't yet say he was confident that his ideas were right. Galileo was cross. He was sure he was right, and he wasn't in the mood for keeping quiet and waiting. It was an impossible situation. The church was hugely powerful. Galileo got worried and agreed to keep quiet. Then he broke his agreement and spoke up again. Galileo was put on trial, he was found guilty, and he was made prisoner in a home that the authorities provided for him. He stayed in there for the rest of his life, developing his ideas and writing a science book. You might think that this situation would put Galileo off religion, but despite his quarrels with the church, Galileo remained a very deeply religious man who read and valued the Bible. How come? Well, Galileo attributed our scientific abilities to God. He believed that we humans can work things out scientifically because God has given us senses and brains which we can use to study nature and think about how it works. So, Galileo reasoned, why would God double up and use the Bible to tell us how the universe works? Surely that's for science. The Bible must have another purpose. The writing in the Bible is very different to scientific writing, he thought. The language is often visual and colourful and describes the way that the world seems to humans. The writing is personal. It's about people's lives and their struggles. What's great about the Bible, he thought, is that the people are struggling with the very same questions that puzzle us today. Things like, what should we be doing in our lives and how can we make a positive difference? Galileo remembered a phrase he'd heard a cardinal say once. The Bible is intended to teach us how to go to heaven and not how the heavens go. And so, Galileo, the famous Italian scientist who invented the telescope and got in trouble with the church, believed throughout his whole life it's very important to have both science and religion.
Look at that. That was super interesting. Got to hear all about Galileo. Let's see this one. It's gonna be an ad. That was actually the one that I had up next, but then it happened to be right there, so it was perfect.
You, me, every single thing on this planet, we're all zooming through space right now, orbiting the sun at an average speed of 107,000 kilometers an hour, and rotating while we're doing it. But the sun, moon, planets, and stars all look like they're moving through the sky. Right? So it's easy to imagine that we're staying put while they all move around us, as long as you don't look too closely. Which is why the whole idea that the Earth orbits the sun wasn't really accepted until a few hundred years ago, and it took a lot of convincing. A lot of the old geocentric model, where Earth's at the center of everything, was based on ideas developed by ancient Greek philosophers Aristotle and Ptolemy. They explained that the Earth stayed put at the center of everything, and anything we can see in the sky, the sun, the moon, stars, planets, everything, orbited it in perfect circles. But that didn't explain why planets, which at the time referred to anything that looked different from the background stars, including the sun and the moon, sometimes changed brightness or occasionally looked like they were moving in a completely different direction. So the geocentric model tried to explain them using epicycles. These are imaginary points that were moving in imaginary circles with planets orbiting around those points. And it sort of worked, though eventually they had to draw more circles around the circles to explain some things and have the planets move faster or slower at certain points in their orbits. Diagrams of the sky were kind of a mess. There were at least a couple of Greek philosophers who disagreed, and the geocentric model was questioned by Muslim scholars since at least the 10th century. But for a long time, especially among Western civilizations, it was just accepted. Everything revolved around the Earth, even if it was hard to explain sometimes. At least until Copernicus came along. Nicolaus Copernicus was a well-known Renaissance thinker who spent the last few decades of his life developing a heliocentric model, where the sun is the center of the universe, which he published just before he died. And okay, we know that the sun isn't the center of the universe, but it was a lot closer to the truth. Copernicus realized that the math was a little simpler if you just had Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the only planets we knew about at the time, orbiting the sun, with the moon orbiting the Earth. He used epicycles too, but all the planets in his model kept the same speed throughout their orbits, which is what you'd expect if the orbit is a circle. But it was still hard to prove that the heliocentric model was more accurate. For one thing, even if they made things simpler, those circular orbits in Copernicus's universe were wrong. And it was just as bad as the geocentric model for predicting how the planets would move. Then in the early 1600s, Johannes Kepler realized that orbits didn't have to be circles. And if he assumed that they were ellipses, the math fit the motion of the planets, sun, and moon a lot better using the heliocentric model. Around the same time, Galileo Galilei's telescope made things even more convincing, mostly thanks to Jupiter and Venus. When Galileo pointed his telescope at Jupiter, he was able to see its 4 biggest moons: Ganymede, Callisto, Io, and Europa. They were pretty concrete proof that not everything in the sky was orbiting Earth. Then he noticed something weird about Venus. It goes through phases just like our moon does, from new to full and back, but it's much bigger when it's new than when it's full. That made no sense in the geocentric model, which predicted that sometimes Venus would be closer to Earth when it was new, but sometimes it would be closer when it was full. In the heliocentric model, though, the sun, Venus, and Earth lined up so that Venus would be closer to Earth when it was new. Even with all this evidence, it took a long time for the heliocentric model to be accepted. The church banned heliocentric works until 1758. These days, we know that the heliocentric model wasn't exactly right either. The sun isn't at the center of the universe. There's a lot more out there. And if you want to get technical about it, both Earth and the sun orbit the same point, the center of mass of the solar system, which is just the center point of all the objects in it, based on their mass and how far they are from each other. Since the sun has 99.87% of all the mass in the solar system, the center of mass is pretty close to the center of the sun. But it does move around a bit, depending on where the planets are in their orbits. So one thing we know with 100% certainty is that the geocentric model is wrong. We've sent telescopes, probes, and people up there, and we've seen it for ourselves. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Space, which was brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. If you want to help us keep making...
Awesome. So that was a very quick overview of different scientists that had different theories about the planets, and it ended with Galileo Galilei and his telescope, which we just read about. Okie dokie now. The last thing I want to do is I want you to take out your worksheets. Take out your worksheets and find page 28. Find page 28, because that is your homework. Page 28. I will show you what it looks like. says Unit 5, picture talk. Yep, Ploy has it. Very good. Unit 5, picture talk. Okay, that is your homework. I want you to fill out the chart on page 28. Okay, there's only 6 questions. So I think you'll be able to figure it out. Page 29 has some facts about the planets that you can use to answer page 28. So use page 29 to find use page 29 as a reference, okay? Because page 29, it tells you the temperature, tells you the size, and it tells you the distance from the sun. So on page 29, you can use those facts to answer the questions on page 28, okay? So use 29 to answer 28. Does that make sense? Page 28 is homework. I see a thumbs up from Ploy. I see. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you got it. Page 28 is your homework. Okay, that's the end of our class. I am so proud of your participation today. I really appreciate it. I had lots of friends being brave and trying their best, and that's all I want. Okay, Ploy, do you want to pick a song?
Butter, BTS.
Ah, Butter by BTS, a classic. Awesome. All right, let's sing our thank you song and we will go. Thank you, thank you. I really want to thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. ขอบคุณค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ. I'll see you guys next time.
สวัสดีครับ